And Mike Junara told me the theme is opening up. But I don't know. Let's see where we get to. Let's see if we can feel opened up by the end. That's my aim. So, so also the part of the theme was connecting different ways, different sort of aspects of meditation with Buddha figures. So there was these Buddha figures. I was given this Buddha figure, this golden figure, and it made me think of the shrine, beautiful shrine with all these flowers on, lovely, and then made me think, why do we have shrines? Why do we have Buddha figures around? I know when I was younger, I would see when I was going clubbing. There'd be all these in these fancy clubs, Buddha figures, and it just was cool, right? It was it suggested cool in some way, but I think it was also communicated to me peace, ease, something easeful, something peaceful. And you have the historical Buddha, so the original Buddha, if you like, who lived 2,500 years ago. So he was a man, he went on a journey, he went on a spiritual journey, he discovered the truth, he became enlightened, and which kind of means that he sort of freed himself from all limitations. That's one way you can think of it. Freed himself from all limitations, all negativities. Classically, you say that he freed himself from greed, hatred, and ignorance, or craving, hatred, and ignorance. And how that then expressed itself was a man walking on the earth who met every experience with awareness, with love, with wisdom. That was just his natural way of being. The key thing, though, about the historical Buddha is that he shared his journey. He didn't just go, right, I'm enlightened, let me just enjoy this. He actually shared his journey and how he achieved it and how to achieve it. How to achieve liberation, how to achieve freedom from limitation. He shared it, and then others were able to follow suit and also became free. So, and that's the tradition. We basically had the tradition that's just gone on from generation to generation, people passing on their experience to each other, and then other people finding that within their own experience. And at the beginning, there was no Buddha figures. There was the memory of the Buddha. So when he passed, he breathed his last breath. People had to just remember, oh yeah, there was this. He really lived, this man, and he really did this thing that we're all benefiting from, and that we can also do. So people just had the memory of him to begin with, and then a few hundred years later, somebody at some point said, hey, maybe we can, rather than just trying to remember, let's actually create something that we can visually see, that reminds us of him, as it were. Because obviously after a few hundred years, memories are going to fade, right? People are going to forget. So they started making various different images. And that's why we have figures like this now. They're all different though. If you go to a shop and you see different, they're all completely different, because there's been lots of Buddhas. There's been lots of people that have attained, liberation, enlightenment through the ages. People that have really been very advanced in their spiritual practice. There's been lots of them. So they're all, and Buddhism's travelled around different countries, so it takes on the cultures and then the kind of images really of those cultures as well. So that's the historical Buddha, and everything comes from the historical Buddha. So, but over the years, you've also got these sort of what we call archetypal Buddhas. They haven't lived. They've come from the kind of depths of people's imaginations, depths of people's practice, meditation practice. But they all still come from the historical Buddha, because the historical Buddha and an enlightened being Anyone that sort of achieved this great, achieved, really seen the mystery of what it is to be alive, then you've really grown many different qualities. You've really expanded your understanding, your sense of what it is to be human. And so in that, all these other qualities come. So how do you, and then if somebody says like compassion, if you think about compassion, what is that? How do you express that? So what happened over time was that people were like, we know that Buddhas or any enlightened being, any advanced being will be very compassionate. But what does that look like? Yeah, if you're with them every day, you'll see what that looks like, because you'll see how they interact and how they, respond to things. You'll have a real sense of that. But if you're not seeing that, how can you bring it to mind? So then, in a way, through people's practice, through people's meditation, these other figures came into being, called archetypal figures. They're archetypal, as in they represent certain qualities of the kind of the depths of the human heart, really, and the vastness of human potential. This is what these qualities are. So compassion is a very elevated, beautiful quality. And, in a way, people wanted to represent that in some way. It wasn't even a conscious thing. It just sort of arose from the depths of people's meditation practice. Compassion. If you had a being who was truly compassionate, they might look like this. That's what it might look like. If somebody was fearless, they might look like that. If they were full of energy and broke through obstacles, they might look like that. That's kind of, how I think of these archetypal figures. But it was all to help people connect with potential, connect with what's possible, because we often don't see what's possible. And we think of ourselves often as quite small and a bit insignificant and a bit like, let me just get through life and do the best I can, and that's as best as I can do. So sometimes you need your imagination to go, hey, maybe there's more. Maybe there's so much more to our experience than we really realise. And we need to see that. We need to somehow get into a different kind of space, which is what a shrine room is, and see what else is possible. If I can't see it in me, maybe I can see it somewhere else. Yeah. So what do we do? What do people do? These figures, they meditate on them. These archetypal figures, they meditate on them. They all have different. Some of them have different colours and different implements. Like Chadamalini was talking about, that staff. That's a particular implement. So meditating on them and seeing seeing how you respond to it, seeing how you respond to it. But you can also just reflect on the qualities. People reflect on the qualities of the historical Buddha to see, what was it like? What did he do? How did he respond to things? And how would I have responded to that thing? What does wisdom look like in action? So people reflect on the qualities of the figures, and then bring to mind various different stories and as well. So you can reflect on it through the colours, through the implements, through the actual study the actual qualities, so through study as well, and then just through sort of associate different images that are kind of connect you in, or stories. So this morning, or today, when I was sort of reflecting on a little bit this talk, on me coming tonight, I just sort of sat in meditation. And I just thought, let's see what comes. Let's see what images come to me. When I think about this particular figure that I'm talking about tonight, let me just see what comes. And it was really interesting what came, actually. It was a bit sort of surprising, because this figure is the figure's called Ratnasambhava. He's a golden figure. And he's known as a Buddha of beauty, of creativity, of generosity. But what came was, and I thought, well, let's see what comes. Maybe a story from the life of the Buddha will come. Maybe a teaching will come. I don't know. Let me just meditate. But what came was an image of me at about 5 years old, walking down the streets of East London. And I remember the scene. So the scene it was a very pivotal moment in my life, because I had fallen off the climbing frames at school and banged my head. Probably was a bit concussed, actually, because I remember kind of being really dizzy, but no one seemed to be around. It was home time anyway, so my sister was taking me home. She was walking off with her friend, so I was just walking behind her. And it was a moment that I just was like, I looked around at my environment. And I think I hadn't probably at that point taken in my environment before. I looked around and I could feel a kind of sinking feeling. I looked around. Firstly, I was aware of the greyness of the sky. It was a kind of bleak day, as we're kind of familiar with. Certainly in the winter, so it was bleak. And I remember adults walking towards me, probably picking up their kids from school. I remember their faces were just like scrunched, like tight. And they were kind of, like their whole bodies were like this. Maybe it was cold as well, so they were kind of like this, but they didn't look happy. That was the main thing. They didn't look happy. I remember also looked on the walls and there was graffiti on the wall, and I knew that graffiti was hostile to me. Like now I know the language of racism, but I didn't know that language then. I just knew, I remember I could read, and I was like, oh, and I remember going, oh, I think somehow, that's not nice to me. So I remember that, and then there was this terrible smell. And somebody said, oh, what's that smell? And they're like, oh, there's a dead dog round the corner. It's the East End of London back in the day. Apparently it used to happen every now and again. And at that moment, I had my whole body went, oh, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this to be my life. I don't want this to be my environment. And I didn't say it in those words, but it was like a kind of no, a kind of real ugh. And I could feel my body contracting. I could feel myself go, oh, like sort of almost shrink from it. And then it was like a thought that just appeared. That was like, I'm going to be free of this. I want to be free of this. And then the next thought was, I want to find beauty. I had a third thought that took me years to it wasn't even a thought, it was like a voice that came. And it said, and you're going to change your name. Which I didn't understand. I was like, but the other two, to be free of this, I'm so grateful for that moment now, because, it gave me some kind of direction. Like I didn't like what I was seeing, and it was like, well, there's freedom from this. I didn't know what that freedom would look like, of course. Didn't know what that would mean, but I just thought, maybe it showed me, don't have to, it can be different. And the beauty, I didn't know what that meant really either. But somehow it gave me a kind of curiosity at least. Like, I don't know what it means, but find out. So that was the first image I thought of this morning, that came to me this morning when I was meditating and I was reflecting on this figure. And then the second one was, I'm still in the same school, still in the East End, a couple of years later. And it was, I did ballet classes. There was a well-known, I think she was quite well-known, ballet teacher who was part of her, altruistic activity to go to poor schools and teach ballet. So I was doing ballet. Apparently I was quite good, according to my dad. And I can't remember the classes that well, actually. But I do remember that she took us to a real ballet. She took us to, a group of us, to maybe it was Covent Garden or some fancy, place. I'd never been in a theatre or anything like that. Can't even remember if I'd ever been in town, And there we were watching from the gods, watching these people on stage doing pirouettes and things like that. It wasn't something I thought, I want to do that when I'm older. I didn't see myself doing that at all. But I was fascinated by the whole kind of space, the whole context of it. And it was like, God, people are doing this for their living. So that was just amazing. But she also took us to her house. And it was like this really large house out in the, I don't know, Richmond or somewhere, Welwyn Garden City, somewhere like that. And, she had a pond with lilies. And we ate cucumber sandwiches with the crust off. And I remember sitting there, not wanting to move, because it was just such a whole world that I hadn't experienced before. And again, it wasn't like I thought I want to live like this. That didn't occur to me. It was more like, people live like this. There's other ways of living. So that's the other image that came to me this morning and I thought, why have these two things emerged? And the third thing that came was, so I had two images, and then it was then coming back to Shakyamuni. Actually, I don't know if it was Shakyamuni. I sat there and I had these two stories or two elements of my life. And I thought, what else is going to come? And then what came was just this sense of gold. It was as like I was being bathed in sunlight. So suddenly I went from these stories to being bathed in sunlight. And if you could imagine being bathed in sunlight right now, whereby you're just sitting there and suddenly your whole body is suffused by a golden colour. And it's around you and it pours within you and it is like sunlight. So when you've got the sun on you, you kind of feel like your body wants to open up. You can feel more that sense of relaxation. That's what came, this great, like a beautiful dazzling sunlight. And in this sunlight, I then saw a jewel. So there was this jewel. I was holding a jewel suddenly. And my hand was then in this gesture. And it was this gesture of this open hand. But it was a very easeful, the whole thing, as I sat there, I just felt very at ease. Like I felt my body was very at ease. I was kind of doing this hand gesture, but it was just very kind of, of course, my hand's open and of course it's open. And I've got this jewel. And actually with this jewel, I could feel a real something, like we did the meditation earlier, there was something that was very rooted in this experience. Like something very confident. Like if you really had a jewel, and a really large, beautiful jewel, that you just held, it would sort of rub off on you. Something of it would rub off on you and you'd be like, yes. Not in a kind of, but just like, yes, there's value here. I'm holding something of value. So that's what occurred to me today. And I then thought of the original Buddha, Shakyamuni, this historical Buddha, and then found this quote that from Bhante Sangharakshita, and he says, the first thing about the Buddha, the historical Buddha, is his warmth, his compassion. And yet Shakyamuni, his name, he was described like a great sun whose very presence had a powerful effect on those who he met. And part of this quality of this figure, this figure called Ratnasambhava, is that he, you can see him like a great sun as well. He's golden, and he holds this great jewel, and his hand is outstretched. And he sees everything with great compassion, great warmth. And he sees everybody's value. He sees everything has intrinsic value. This is what when I was 5 and had that first experience, walking down the road and seeing everything, I think one of the things I felt, and it really became quite a theme for me growing up, was that I could see, I had a sense of my own value, but I could also see that I wasn't valued in different spaces that I went into. That it was like I could see that different people were valued differently according to all kinds of things. And I could see that not just in my own life, I could see that in the world, I could see people treating each other, in a way that you could see they weren't valued. I began to, part of my quest for freedom was like trying to understand, why is the world the way it is? Why is there poverty? Why is there racism? Why is there, wars? Why is the world difficult in the way that it is? And I remember, it was hard for me initially to think, how do I get free of this? I don't understand what it is. So first I started trying to understand it. And in a way, it was like I just had this very innocent sense of, I just want to learn how to care for myself and others. And I want other people to care for others. It's just very simple, very innocent. But why don't we? Why is it so hard? Why do we get into all the difficulties we get into? And what I saw was, we struggle to value. We struggle to value ourselves, and we struggle to value others in all kinds of ways, and that shows up in all kinds of ways. Understanding it, so I studied the sociology of it and the economics of it and the politics of it, but understanding it didn't change it. It still was going on. So I thought, okay, it's helpful to understand, but actually I'm still struggling with how to respond to it. And I could tell for myself, if somebody praised me, then I was happy. And if somebody criticised me, then I was unhappy. Still a bit the case. But that kind of thing, something went well, great, I felt good. If something didn't go well, I felt bad. Even that, I was confused as a child. Of course not everybody's, of course you're going to get criticised. Of course you're not always going to be, of course. Why does it affect us in that kind of way? Why does our own sense of self and worth go down if somebody has an opinion or view, or just gives you some feedback? So those kind of questions were why? So the Shakyamuni, the Buddha, and any advanced practitioner, and the training is such that we're learning to value, we're learning to see our sort of intrinsic worth. That's what the Metta Bhavana practice, the practice of loving kindness. For those of you who've done that practice, that's what it's really trying to do, our intrinsic worth. And I think one of my breakthroughs on my journey was realising that, I thought my worth was me doing amazing things, accomplishing things. I thought as I accomplished more and did more things, I'd feel better about myself, and I'd feel better about other people, even if they didn't feel good. Even if I got criticism, I'd feel better somehow. And at some point in my journey, I realised, I was that I realised the pressure that was always putting on me, actually. That I was always, there's a bit of me was always trying to prove myself in some way. And then that created a basic insecurity as well. So a breakthrough for me was suddenly I was meditating one day on retreat, doing the Metabhavana practice, and I realised that I was valuable just for being me. And I didn't have to prove myself to anyone. Just being human. If I was doing what I was doing was learning to be human more and more, that was enough. That was like, wow. And I remember thinking, really? And that was a really helpful shift, because up until that point I was definitely like, I've got to have this, I've got to do this, I've got to accomplish this, I've got to, make this happen, and then somewhere along the line I will feel good about who I am, and I'll also be better with others. And that just, I wouldn't say fell away completely, but it's certainly the kind of, the delusion of that sort of began to dissipate. So maybe we have intrinsic value. Maybe there is this jewel, in the very hearts of our being, very hearts of who we are, but we don't see it. And because we don't see it, we can always feel this sense of, you might feel it as a lack of, value or worth, or lack of care for oneself. You might also just experience it as, just this kind of insecurity that comes, when things are difficult, or when conditions are not sort of stable, just this ongoing insecurity where you're questioning yourself. You can experience it in all kinds of different ways, but it's the same basic thing. So a Buddha, Ratnasambhava, this golden figure, but any Buddha, any enlightened, any noble being, they see everybody's intrinsic worth, everybody's value. It's called the wisdom of equality. Just by being sentient, you have potential. Just by working on your potential, you can grow. That is what we're here for. We can do other things along the way. Build things, that develop this, accomplish that, achieve that. We can do those things. But that's not quite the point. The point is those can help us do the work of growing. But the work is growing. The work is coming into relationship with what it is to be human and learning to value this very existence. The more we learn to do that, value this very existence, the more we're doing that for others. That's what I saw on my journey. Because there was a point in my history where, I was seeing all the injustices, I was seeing all the things that weren't working in the world, and I got very angry. I got very upset. I got very I don't like this, and I don't like that kind of person. I don't like that. I could, people were put in camps. If you agreed with me and my version of the world, great. If you didn't, then I didn't like you. And then at some point, again, another breakthrough was like, how is this going to keep playing out? There's 8 billion people in the world. It's going to cause some stress. And it certainly is not the direction of happiness. And I did want to feel free. And I wanted beauty. So every now and again, I'd sort of find myself, oh God, I'm in a tight place again. I'm in a place of contraction. I'm in a place of rejection. I'm in a place of judging. Is this free? Doesn't feel free. And I'd come back. Does it feel beautiful? No. I have to kind of, okay, try again. So yeah, and the Buddha Shakyamuni, he was a great example of this kind of wisdom of equality, because he, he sort of he just saw people's intrinsic worth, and there's loads of stories of him the way he did that. The one that came to me today, interesting. Well, actually, when he was getting ready to die, getting ready to pass away, his assistant, his attendant, Ananda, went off and was crying, and the Buddha sensed that he was crying and said, bring Ananda here, because, and Ananda was crying because the Buddha was about to die, and and his words were, "Oh, he who was so kind." So the Buddha had accomplished loads of things, but that's what Ananda, his close attendant, said, "He who was so kind." And there's loads of stories of the Buddha just meeting different people, in all their challenges, all their different situations. As one of them was the case of dysentery, where one of the monks, the Buddha's kind of, goes to different places, walks around India and goes to different monks who are gathered. And one of the monks was left in his hut with dysentery. And the other monks weren't caring for him, because they were just like, oh, he's useless, he can't do, he's sick. We've got important things to do. So they would go off and do other things, and then this monk was left there. And the Buddha found this monk, helped him, cleaned him up, put on fresh robes, and then said to all of the monks, what did he say? He probably said, I actually don't know what the Buddha said. But I imagine he said, care for him. Care for him. Care for for everybody. You're, in a way, again, that's everybody's valid. Even if he's sick, it's not about being useful. So he can't clean, he can't do the things that the other monks were doing, but he still has value. He still has this intrinsic value. Care for him. That you need to be a family, if you like, for each other. Care for him. Care for all of you equally. Lots of stories like that. And the Buddha was also against the caste system. Again, for the same reason. It's like, there's no one, your worth is not by your circumstances of your birth. Yeah. So this wisdom of equality, seeing the essential sameness in, who we are, in our experience, being able to see that actually, just like we were lying down then or sitting in meditation, it's like, gosh, we all have bodies. We all go through ups and downs. We all have pleasant experiences, unpleasant experiences, neutral experiences. That is just what it is to be human. We all suffer. Every single person on this planet suffers in some way. And none of us want to suffer. We all want to be free of it in some way. We just don't know how. So we go about it in all kinds of different ways. And in that, we can end up causing suffering for ourselves and others. So Buddha sees all of that. An enlightened being sees all of that. So they're just responding with that compassion, with that recognition that, oh, okay, we don't always, people like, us, we don't always know how to go about it the right kind of way, the way that's actually going to help free us. And the Buddha sees that and then guides and then tries to go, okay, this way, that direction. But we have to follow it. We have to make that journey. So our intrinsic worth, this wisdom of equality, an absence of that kind of negative discrimination. And which kind of simplifies life suddenly, because it's like, oh, the most important thing I can do is learn to value the life I have. The most important thing I can do is learn to just understand and this mind I have. I have this mind. I have a heart. And gosh, it's amazing. Like consciousness is amazing. That's what we have. We have this, human beings have this consciousness. There's consciousness everywhere, but human beings have a consciousness that we can actively choose to cultivate and understand how it works. And that then changes how we perceive our everyday ordinary experience. It's not about, I just got to get up and do stuff. It's kind of like, how can I engage with what I'm doing in a way that I can see its meaning? And then that can bring meaning. So there's a poem that I like from Raymond Carver. Raymond Carver was a poet, and he was dying of cancer, and his wife said to him, well, what do you think? How do you think life was for you? Did you get what you wanted from life? And so this is the poem. She says, and did you get what you wanted from this life, even so? And he says, yes, I did. And he says, to call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on this earth. Simple as that. To call myself beloved and to feel myself beloved on this earth. A Buddha might say to feel that beloved, to feel everybody in that way, all beings. It would extend to all beings. So Ratnasambhava, this golden figure, is associated with the earth. You know, because we all contain earth. You know, we're all born, we go back to earth. You know, and if you can value everything intrinsic about the earth, not just us, ourselves, others, and the very earth itself. It's like, wouldn't life be completely different if we were taught that from the beginning? If when I was at school, that's what I was being taught. I think the ballet teacher was trying to do something like that. I think she was trying to say, you know, you're valuable. Don't look at all your circumstances and over-identify with your circumstances, because you're not your circumstances. You're not your past. We're deeply impacted by our past. We're deeply impacted by our conditions, our circumstances, but that's not actually who we essentially are. I think she was trying to kind of give us that message. This is a quote from Bhante Sangharakshita. And he says, the enlightenment of the Buddha was not a cold, detached knowledge. He saw with warmth. He saw with feeling. What is more, he saw everything as being pure, or shubha, which also means beautiful. The Buddha saw everything as pure beauty because he saw everything with compassion. And then he says, just as conversely, when you hate someone, they appear ugly. We know that, do we? When you start not getting on with somebody, you start seeing all their faults. You know, what I've learned to do is kind of go, but how does that feel for me? Like, you can project it outwards and think, oh yeah, this, they don't like this and you don't like that. But what is the experience of actually hating or disliking? It's actually painful when you really examine it. So there's that again, I think it's a Buddhist image of, you know, when you're really annoyed with somebody, and you know, you just kind of like, you know, going round and round with it, and you think you can't. How can you possibly let it go? How can you possibly forgive them because they've done this, this, and this, and this? And you're going round and round with it. It's like picking up a burning bit of coal and wanting to throw it. But we get hurt by it, first and foremost. Yeah. So that's been a journey of kind of, okay, recognizing that when I'm in, you know, those kind of states, you know, angry or whatever states, painful states, it's painful to me. That is suffering. And that's what we do in the Metta Bhavana as well, in this practice. We're kind of like recognizing painful states. Not trying to just kind of get rid of them. We're not going, oh, that's bad, I shouldn't be feeling that. No. It's like, actually, we need to learn, oh, this is what this feels like. to have this painful negative state. Because if you see that, oh, this is actually painful. Oh, it's painful here, it's painful there. It makes me think this, it makes me, makes me want to do that. Oh, actually, it offers you a potential choice. Because you're like, do you want this? Do you want to keep going round and round the story? What effect is it having? Oh, okay, actually it's causing some suffering. Oh, well, give yourself some metta. Give yourself some metta. Because in that state, if you're suffering, you can respond to that suffering. You can have care for yourself. Because remember, we're trying to treat ourselves with intrinsic value, intrinsic worth. That we are fundamentally okay. We just don't always know how to go about our experience in a way that's freeing. So then if you give yourself metta, then a space opens up for a different response. You something softens. You can then begin to let something go. And it doesn't mean you don't have to respond to the situation, but your response isn't that contracted, tight, painful response. It's a much more creative response. What's actually going to help in that situation for you and the other person or the other, or whatever the situation is. So actually, to discover something's beauty, it's a bit of a paradox. We kind of need to sort of see what's already ugly in our experience, what's already painful in our experience. We sort of have to get into a relationship with that. Sometimes, in order for us to see it for what it is, and then recognize there's another way. So this is quite a challenge, really, to kind of go, is the world, I'll sort of say that again. So the Buddha sees things with warmth and compassion because he sees everything as being pure or shubha, which also means beautiful. Do we see everything as pure or beautiful? How is that possible that everything is pure and beautiful? Anyone? Anyone go, I know, I agree with that.
I do.
Oh, do, okay.
Because it all comes from suffering. So it's all reaction.
Right, yeah. But is it beautiful?
Yeah, because it's an attempt to survive.
Ah. Right, okay. So it's an attempt to survive, you're saying?
Yeah, and it's a misguided attempt to
Yeah.
survive. But it was the only thing when we were small and didn't know very much.
Yeah.
It's the only thing we could do.
Yeah.
And the fact that we survived is kind of beautiful.
Okay, yeah. And actually that is part of it. Part of it is we're hardwired to survive. And we then experience threat very easily. And then a lot of our actions come out of that, yeah? So, and that is, when I say hardwired, it's just part of how our ordinary mind will work, yeah? And I guess, what I've seen is that the more you can, so when you're in those kind of states, treating ourselves with warmth and compassion and going, God, this is suffering, and then noticing how that changes your experience. Noticing, gosh, actually something is softening. I'm able to let go of something. I'm not gripping or holding on in the same way. And then going, oh, I want a better way. I want a different way. And now maybe I've got the opportunity to do so. So that is one way, because if we can do that for ourselves, then we can see that in others. We can see, oh, I think that's where they are as well, because you recognize it. I think the other thing I also think is, it's the nature of conditioning. Like, we learn so many different behaviours and habits and ways of being, and we pick up all kinds of views, that we just sort of accumulate them. Have you seen that? There's a kind of statue. I haven't seen it in real life, but I've seen it online, where there's I think as a woman, it's a kind of bronze statue, and it's something to do with all the various things we accumulate, activities, and she's got a chair on her back, she's got 3 kids she's carrying, she's got all kinds of, basically it's a sculpture with all kinds of additions attached to her, you know, washing machine, dishes, all pegs. And it's kind of like, gosh, imagine if that was actually how we lived, whereby every difficult thing that we had, or every difficult person, or every difficult job, or whatever it was, it became attached to us. And we then walked about life with the visual of our past. Can you imagine what that would look like? But we don't see the visual of our past, do we? Thank goodness. We don't see the visual of our past. No one else sees the visual of our past, but they just see us. But we are carrying our past with us. And some of our past we haven't yet been able to let go of. And that past was conditioned by so many other factors, so many other causes. And those things were conditioned. So actually, where does it start? Where does it all start? Like, if you really think about it, where does all your experience start? You could say, oh, it started at school. But did it? It's like parents. But where did their experience start? We're carrying remnants of all of those things. That's conditioning. And it's only when you recognize those things through meditation and practice that you can go, oh, maybe that's not me. That's just what I've picked up. So maybe I can put it down. Yeah, lovingly. And maybe that was that event. And, you know, so you can start putting things down, and then you sort of like, you're freeing yourself. And then you see yourself a bit, oh, this is more who I am. Like seeing your actual nature. So that's the practice. The practice is, can we see more and more of our nature? If we can see more and more of our nature, that we're not who we really are, and not all our conditioning. And I had one experience of this when I was 14. I'd spent 3 years. It was 3 consecutive summers. Going and spending a month in Holland. It was a scheme they had in the local borough to send 15 kids from the local borough to spend a month with a Dutch family. And we didn't have mobile phones or any way, like the only way you're going to get right home was like a postcard and the occasional phone call, because phone calls were expensive. So imagine, like, you know, I was at 11 when I first went. 11 or 12 when I first went. You know, we met, you know, we went on the ferry, we met, we didn't know who we were going to meet, and then our names were called out, and then a family moved towards us, and they were whisked off. You know, and then, like, at first it was fun. We were like, yay, you know, we was all in the cars, there was all these cars, and we were waving each other in the back, all the kids. And then gradually the cars went off to different locations. And I found myself in the middle of the Dutch countryside, you know, with a windmill and clogs and cows. Just completely living a different life to what it was growing up in East End. But I went 3 times, and on the 3rd time I came back, and I remember standing in my street and suddenly it was like, well, who am I really? Am I, like, what's really me? Because I realised that suddenly I thought to myself, now if you'd been born not in this area, but there in the Dutch countryside with the cows and the windmills and the clogs and the organ, they had an organ in their house. Would I be the same person I am now? Would I have the same personality and same, you know, would that be me? Or would I be completely different? So what am I? Am I these conditions of East End of London? Is that why I'm like this? Or if I'm not these conditions, then who am I? Am I my conditions or am I not? because I'd had this experience in Holland, and I felt each time I came back, I felt quite different. Like it had an effect on me. So then I thought, I'm now confused in a sense, like what essentially is me. But that was such a helpful, that was so helpful, because I then had to go, well then what is me? What is essentially me? That's not my conditions and not my parents and not my siblings and not this. And that is a quest. You're not going to get the answer intellectually. I mean, you could try, but I somehow knew it wasn't an intellectual answer. It's like that's a journey to go on. And that's a journey where you have to go within and discover mind, discover consciousness, discover that there's an observer to the whole experience that we're having. You've ever had that? You're doing something, you're really in it, but then there's also a bit of you going, commenting. The commentator. There's an observer. But is that you, the observer? It's fascinating. Anyway, I digress. This Buddha, Ratnasambhava, the wisdom of equality, but he also is a Buddha of beauty. And the beauty for me, as I said, sometimes we've got to face the ugliness of things, but to feel the suffering in that, and then want the freedom of that. But we also got to see our conditioning, and that we're not truly that, and nor is anybody fully their conditioning either. And then how can we respond with compassion? And I guess for me, going on this journey of beauty, for me it took me out of East London. I left East London for a while, just to experience something else. And then I came back. In fact, I came back, to the East End of London. I actually thought I'd never come back to the East End of London. But now I'm in, I live in the East End of London, work in Bethnal Green, like I'm right at the heart of it. In fact, I'm actually not far from where we grew up. So I'm literally, down the road. So I'm back, but actually I experience it and see it very differently because of the perception I bring to it. If you respond with compassion to yourself and others, there's space to connect, there's space to discover, there's space to know, there's space to create something different. So for me, beauty did lie in the arts. I got involved in the arts because I wanted to learn to create, but I also got involved working with people. So I found beauty in lots of different ways, but fundamentally I had to find that beauty within. I had to know that, there was something of intrinsic value that I always had and I could always tap into. And Ratnasambhava also represents riches, that inner riches, inner richness, inner abundance. We're so busy out there often trying to accomplish and find things out there that we don't then look at the consciousness that we have and answer these amazing questions. How does what is it to feel loved and beloved on the earth? What is it to treat myself with great care and compassion and then extend that to others? That's a great amount of richness. So we have this abundance of inner richness that we have to go on a journey to discover, and then we share it. And we share it very effortlessly because it's become who we are. That's the journey. I'm going to say another poem, and then we'll... How about this one? This is from a Zen poet, a Zen monk who lived remotely. And he says, "The rain has stopped, the clouds have drifted away, and the weather is clear again. If your heart is pure, then all things in your world are pure. Abandon this fleeting world. Abandon yourself. Then the moon and flowers will guide you along the way. Abandon this fleeting world, abandon yourself. I was thinking about that today. And let the poem do whatever it needs to do for you. But for me, I was like, when I first heard that poem, I thought it meant give everything up. Give everything up and just practice. But now I don't see it like that at all. I see it as abandon this fleeting world means it's kind of like recognize that the world we're in, we're here for just a finite amount of time. We really want to make the best use of this precious opportunity. And for that, it means discovering more and more who we intrinsically are and what intrinsically life is. And what we're abandoning is this kind of the delusion of, it's all going to work out if I fix it all and accomplish all these things. Because that can be an endless task. Do what we need to do to kind of get through, make life work, as it were. But essentially, the project is to free ourselves from the things that can constrain us, free ourselves from these limits, and open up the richness of mind. Abandon yourself. It's kind of, once you do that, it's like life opens up, and it's vast, and you're opening up to that vastness. So you're abandoning your limited self, the conditioned self, the self that separates off, not the self that's part and woven into the whole of life.